Live from Tel Aviv, the top stories this hour. IDF tanks roll into the Shenjaiya neighbourhood of northern Gaza as the army warns civilians to evacuate. The United States warns its citizens against travel to Lebanon as France expresses extreme concern over the prospect of a war between Israel and Hezbollah. And the Iranian regime urges a high turnout in Friday's elections as a vote is held to replace the late President Raisi. But we begin in Gaza this hour, where the IDF has told civilians to evacuate the Shenjaiya neighbourhood of Gaza City. This after Palestinians reported airstrikes in the area. The IDF last operated in Shenjaiya back in April. To discuss the latest developments in Gaza, I'm joined in the studio by Ruth Wasserman-Land, former member of the Knesset, the research fellow at the Misgav Institute for National Security, former co-chair of the Abraham Accords Parliamentary Caucus, and a former diplomatic envoy in Egypt. Good to see you, Ruth. Thank you for joining us. I'm also managed to destroy all of the tunnels in the north of Gaza.
No, it's going to be a long-term effort. And, when we talk about an area like Shenjaiya, when we look at Jenin, just 2 nights ago, there was a major IDF operation there. And also 22 years ago, there was a massive IDF operation to take Jenin, which had become a terrorist hornet's nest. And then since then, the IDF has been back there for 22 years. And I think that that's the kind of long-term perspective we're going to need to adopt to understand what's at stake in the Gaza Strip. Right now, of course, the fighting is still very high intensity in the Gaza Strip. I'm not comparing it to what's going on in the West Bank, but I think eventually it's going to take on that pattern. The IDF returning to areas again and again based on precise intelligence, using increasingly smaller forces, actually. It will not need a division. It will not need even a brigade in the coming months. I think it can send, several battalions and take out threats, go in and out. That's what Stage C is going to look like and what most of Gaza will look like from a security perspective. And so, as Hamas stops being a terror army...
That note, there is a report in the Times of Israel today which claims that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken told his counterparts here during a recent visit that both Egypt and the United Arab Emirates are prepared to participate in some kind of post-war security force in Gaza. There's been no official response from either country. But joining us now from Egypt, Hussein Kamel Haredi is the former assistant to the Egyptian Foreign Minister, and he's the former director of the Department of Israeli Affairs at the Egyptian Foreign Ministry. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you very much for being with us. So first off, then, is there any truth to this report? Would Egypt be prepared to participate in some kind of way in a post-Hamas security force to keep the peace there?
I doubt very much, madam, if Egypt would, under any circumstances, would send forces in the Gaza Strip. Whether under a regional peacekeeping force or a United Nations peacekeeping force. Then why not? Why don't we sit on the negotiating table with the Palestinian Authority, with Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, with whom Mr. Shimon Peres and the former Israeli Prime Minister Rabin signed the Oslo Accords. Why don't we work? Why don't we operate in this context?
Okay, Mr. Haredi, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
And Ruth Wasserman-Land and Yaakov Lapin are with me. Ruth, you worked for many years, didn't you, as a diplomat in Egypt? Is that the sort of thing you heard when you were there?
First, I very much appreciate listening, and I very much appreciate the fact that an Egyptian perspective is brought here. It doesn't happen every day, such a high-level one. And I wish that there would be a reciprocation, and also Israeli and analysts and high-ranking personalities would be interviewed on Egyptian national television.
And the United States are increasingly concerned about Iran's efforts to build a nuclear bomb and believe Tehran may take advantage of the fact the US is preoccupied with its presidential election campaign. To have reportedly restored working groups. To talk more about that, we're joined by Jason Brodsky, Policy Director at United Against a Nuclear Iran. Great to see you, Jason. And we're coming to the end of President Biden's first term in office. His term began with an attempt to restore the Iran nuclear deal, and it ends with concerns Iran is closer than ever to building a bomb. How did we get here?
It's great to be with you, Laura. I think the United States has appeared distracted to the Iranian regime. It also appears like it doesn't have the will to meaningfully confront Tehran. And when that happens, the Islamic Republic will take full advantage. And I think that there have been a number of concerning reports indicating some movement in the nuclear weapons group inside Iran that
Now, Saudi Arabia is halfway towards completing its Vision 2030 project, an ambitious megacity that's designed to help wean the kingdom's economy off oil in the long term. The Saudi Minister of Economy and Planning, Faisal Al-Ibrahim, made the announcement during a summit in China this week. Well, for more on that, let's go to Dubai. We're joined by our correspondent, Bastien Bourri. So, Bastien, Saudi Arabia say that they're halfway done with this huge project. What does that mean exactly?
Well, they didn't provide any figures, so they can say pretty much what they want. The thing is, Riyadh has not been able to achieve much success in attracting financial resources and investment from foreign governments and companies so far.
The Security Cabinet is meeting on Thursday evening amidst fears around a possible full-blown war against the Hezbollah terror group in southern Lebanon. Speculation around a full escalation is also being fueled by the fact that the precision security operation in Gaza appears to be winding down. And just a short while ago, a major Hezbollah barrage was launched at northern Israel, several interceptions by Israeli defense systems. Meanwhile, intense fighting on this day in the Shenjaiya neighborhood of Gaza reports that 7 people have been killed. Early on Thursday morning, the Israeli army asking all residents of the eastern neighborhoods of Gaza City to evacuate southwards to the humanitarian area. Look, gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to unpack a little bit more about exactly the impact of all of this on Lebanon itself, because as we now know, the United States, Russia, France, Germany and Canada are just some of the countries calling on their citizens not to travel to Lebanon. And in Israel, the state comptroller, Netanyahu Engelman, is warning that Israel is not ready to evacuate civilians in the case of a war in the north due to disagreements between Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and Interior Minister Moshe Arbel. Engelman's office has reportedly written to the Prime Minister to, quote, put things in order. At the same time, diplomatic efforts continue in Washington, as we've already been discussing here in studio. More in major developing story, the organization UN Watch is demanding answers from the United Nations following a sponsored trip to Australia by Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, a trip which involved Palestinian fundraising events and meetings with pro-Palestinian politicians. Now, the question remains, who paid for her controversial $20,000 trip in November? It's not on the list of official UN visits. The UN Watch complaint alleges that a Palestinian lobby group sponsored her trip, and accepting sponsorship from lobby groups is not allowed. The Australian Friends of Palestine Association claimed publicly it had financed the visit, and other organisations said publicly they supported the trip. UN Watch making it clear that if Albanese doesn't produce receipts by Monday, it will launch proceedings to terminate her mandate.